In this clip, we'll begin to create some base detail for our character's pants. All right, great. So in the last clip, we sort of compartmentalized all of the different areas that need to be textured for this texture set and created groups and applied some crazy colors to those areas. Now at this point, we are looking at the pants and we can actually see one sort of sub detail of the pants that really could be compartmentalized in and of itself. And that's these patches right here. So in addition to these patches, I also want to refer back to our concept artwork. So if I pull that up for you, there's a very distinctive detail about our character's pants that's depicted here. They have stripes. So this is another detail that could be sort of a sub detail of the pants group inside of our layer stack. Let's jump back over here into Substance Painter and create a couple of other groups. And I'm going to call this one stripes. And we're going to call this one patches. Now we're not going to mess with these groups in this clip, but this is me sort of further compartmentalizing all of the details that we're going to work on. For right now, let's come back down to this red layer here, and let's call this something like base. Now we know our character didn't have red pants, so we need to change the color for sure. But let's also come over here and disable the contribution for the height and normal channels for this fill layer. I'm not going to create any unique details that would go in either of those two channels for this particular part of the character. I think that that type of detail would be far too small to show up inside of Unity based on kind of the format for our game. So we're not going to mess with that. I am going to come in here and adjust the roughness so they're not quite as shiny for right now. And there we go. That's looking quite a bit better. Now the color is another thing we need to adjust. So let's come over here and begin to change the color. Now what we could do is we could pull our concept artwork up on another monitor and we could use this eyedropper to drag out and sample from the concept artwork. That would probably be the easiest way to get the right color. But that's not really what I'm going to do. I'm just going to mix something that's close. We'll come in here and choose kind of a muddy greenish brown color. Maybe not quite so saturated. Okay, that looks like it should work pretty well. Fantastic. Let me close out of that. Now, in looking at this color that we've got for the base, this is a good starting point, but it feels very uniform. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is color. Let's handle that first. Now, again, we learned in the last module that we could begin to mask by any of the baked maps that we have that are connected to this particular project. We use the ambient occlusion map for the hair. Let's do something a little different this time. Let's come up here and create a fill layer, and I'm going to actually mask this now. Let's go ahead and create a black mask to hide it, and let's go ahead and configure a color. Again, we're going to use our eyedropper to come grab the original color that we started with. And then we're going to use our recent color box to come in and choose a similar color. Sort of like that. That should work. Great. So now we have a second color to create some variation here or some wear, but we don't know how we're going to reveal that or apply that color. We've already completely masked it out using a black mask. So what we could do is we could come and select our mask, and we could come up to this little button here and add a fill effect, just like so. Now, once we add that fill effect, we can come over in our properties panel and manually find our curvature map. These are alphabetical in here. So here is the curvature map that was baked for the pants, or rather for the clothing. I'll go ahead and select that here. And just so you can see that, I'm going to tap the B key a few times, so we can get to the curvature map. And you can see all the really nice detail that's been captured in this map for his pants. So let me tap the M key and we'll go back over here. Now, obviously there is a little bit of an issue in terms of the intensity of that effect. So if we came over here and tapped the C key to look at the base color, you can see we're really not getting much contrast in that. Let's come in and add a levels effect. just like we did before. And we can come in and begin to configure our levels in such a way that more of that color shows through. You can see the contrast is higher here, but not quite as much of it is showing through. I want a little bit more to show through. Maybe a little more contrast. Okay, so that's starting to get there. We could come in here and maybe manipulate this color a bit more. And maybe come in here and again configure our levels a little differently. Completely up to you. There we go. That's a little bit more like what I want. Awesome. So now that we have this variation configured for the color, let's jump back to our material. Now, in looking at this, we really haven't managed the channel contribution for this layer. I'm going to match the base layer here, coming in and disabling height and normal. And obviously it's looking a little shiny in those areas where there's wear. So I may want to come in here and configure the roughness for that. But really, the color and the variation to the pants base based on color, we've solved that problem. But that's not the only thing that is creating sort of this flat uniform look. It's, to be honest, the roughness. So if we look at this and we spin our HDR dome by holding shift and right clicking, you can see here that the light is rolling off of the pants in just about the same way in all areas. I'm going to tap the C key a few times until we get to our roughness map, and there it is. And you can see how similar the values in the pants are. Now, what we could do is we could jump back over here to our base fill layer, and instead of using a base value here, we could maybe think about using a texture. I'm going to choose this B&W Spots 1 right here. So if I choose that, something immediately changes as soon as we drop that in. And you can see if I spin my dome again, my environment light, definitely some variation inside of our roughness map. But be warned, this is not really a good way to do this, especially when your UVs look like this. I'm going to jump back to the roughness map by tapping the C key. And again, look at what we've got going here. There is a nice big fat seam that's visible in this procedurally applied texture. And again, this is because of the UVs. The black and white spots texture doesn't match up where it's applied to the border on one shell for the border on another. So how do we fix this? How can we get the same nice variation in roughness without creating this ugly seam? Well, let's jump back over here and let's get rid of that roughness, just like so. And with that, let's jump back to our material and we'll go ahead and switch our base kind of back where it was. And what I'd like to do instead is I'd like to come in here and create a new paint layer on top. And we're just going to title this layer Roughness. All right, great. So with this layer created, we're going to contribute only to the roughness channel, just like so. Now with this layer, again, this is a paint layer. We're expected to paint details into it, but we don't have to paint with a simple color. Let me show you. If I came in here and used my paintbrush and began to paint, we're painting with this gray value right now. And again, it's selected with this slider right over here in our properties panel. I'm going to undo that with a Control Z. Instead, what I'd like to do is come over here and choose a texture to paint with. So if we scroll down here and choose maybe Clouds 2, this one right here, what we could do here is we could come in and make some basic modifications to this. Things like the histogram position or the histogram contrast might be helpful in configuring this, but ultimately, because of the really dark values in this image, likely we'll have to end up basically coming in and using a levels texture to bring those black values up some. We don't want that much of a shine to our pants. So, but what we can do is come back over here to our brush settings, begin to do things like jitter the size, jitter the flow, jitter the angle, and even the position. So we break the stroke up, sort of like that. And then we can begin to come in here and start to paint. Now, in looking at that, that's obviously very, very small. Let me just make my brush a bit larger here. And there we go. I'm going to tweak my settings just a little bit. There, that's starting to look pretty good. So you can see here how we're able to paint right across that seam, just like so, on this paint layer. Now, what's that look like? I haven't painted the entire thing, but I'd like to see what that looks like by previewing the material. And if we come over here and we begin to spin our environment light, hey, that's looking pretty nice. Mostly rough with splotches that are a little bit shinier. Now again, we could come in here and we could add in a levels effect if we really wanted to. Now notice here that by default, the levels is going to affect the base color. That's not what we want. We want to come over here to our properties panel and change that to affect the roughness. And then we could come in here and begin to adjust this a bit. If we wanted maybe a little bit more shine, but not quite as intense shine. Something like that, maybe. Now, ultimately, this is up to you, the final look, but this is how we can begin to break up the surface of our textures using both base color and roughness values. Okay, I'm going to finish painting this custom roughness map in between this clip and the next, but in the next clip, we're going to move forward and begin to handle some of these additional details for our character's pants.